How are you doing?
Good.
Doing good.
All right.
Let's get to comments. All right.
All right. I think we are live. We had an audio problem for a moment there, but I think hopefully everyone can hear us. So we're going to have in the background some highlights of this year's cam clips. So that's what we're kind of featuring in the background here. But mainly we're here to talk about the chicks and post-fledging period. And so introductions, I'm Sean Peterson. I'm a grad student at UC Berkeley.
And I'm Lynn Schofield. I'm a biologist for the Institute for Bird Populations, and I'll let Walter introduce himself, except first, so this is Walter Kitundu. He's an artist and nature photographer, amongst many other things, musician, and you're really, in a lot of ways, I feel like an expert on this like juvenile phase in raptors, because you spent so much time following around individual birds as they grew up in the Bay Area, and made some really beautiful work. And yeah, I really look up to you and what you do.
Well, that's mutual, 100%. I know that we're here as a doing this live stream and talking to each other professionally, but in this time of the pandemic and social distancing, it's also just really nice to see your faces, since we're dear friends as well. So it's really good to see you, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time.
For sure. Yeah, I'm an artist, and I happen to live in Evanston now, just north of Chicago, and I lived in San Francisco in the Bay Area from just from the beginning of 1999 through the beginning of 2015. So about a little over 15 years. And in that time, spent a lot of time with the raptors, who happen to live in and around the buildings in the built environment.
Yeah. So we'll start. Actually, I'm going to start with a question I saw here. So I'll maybe do moderation, but here, we'll do this question first for you, Walter.
For me, right away. Oh.
Yeah, it's in the stream. So where can we buy prints by Walter?
I'm just telling people to email me, and we can work it out case by case. So some of the images are higher resolution than others, so we can take it case by case, and they can email me through the website. My last name is Kitundu, so it's kitundu.com.
All right, so let's see. I'll go start at the beginning with questions. So with campus currently closed and few people about, are the falcons behaving differently relative to previous years with people everywhere?
So raptors are aware of people on the ground, but in this case, the campus is such a tall, relatively tall structurally, that they don't really worry about us too much. Other species can they care more about stuff that's on the ground. And Walter, you might have seen this with red tails or something, where they're a little more wary if there's people nearby.
Yeah, the adults definitely are and can be more wary, particularly close to nest sites. But that's the wonderful thing about the juveniles. When they come out of the nest, they have all their equipment, and they have their talons and their size and everything else, but they don't really know much. So they walk around and sit on cars and do all sorts of things and get close to people as they learn the lessons of what it really means to be in the built environment around people and navigate those hazards.
All right, and so this is a question we get a lot, is when will the fledglings get their yellow color around the eyes and on the feet, like Grinnell has especially, and how is it adaptive?
Great question. So the full adult coloring will take about a year. So by the end of next summer, we'll have them in full adult plumage and with adults feet and eye coloring, facial skin and leg skin. And the skin it varies a lot in how deep the yellow is, depending on genetics and diet of the bird. So there can be a lot of variation there. And then I think it's mostly a sexual selection trait. So it's about being able to show off your fitness. Do you know otherwise, or Walter, do you know if there's a reason for the yellow coloring?
I think my understanding is the same as yours, a kind of like display of fitness and a side effect of their diet. Beyond that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I will say it is very much diet-linked carotenoids in prey, which higher quality diets usually involve more carotenoids in that diet. So it is a signal of a bird that is eating better often. But again, there's also a lot of genetic variation. And so do juvenile birds, does their coloring affect the way adults treat them?
Yeah, it does. I think adults are a little more careful when they are if a juvenile shows up in someone else's territory, they'll kind of be chased away, but a little more gently than another adult bird. If it's another adult bird, they'll be very aggressive in trying to chase the bird off the territory.
All right, and so here's a question. So after the chicks fledged, some people noticed that they were eating a rodent. Did they get that from Annie?
They did. So there was a rodent, which is relatively rare with peregrine falcons. They almost exclusively hunt birds, but if there's an easy meal, the birds will go for it. So this is, it was brought by Annie, so it's definitely something that she caught. And it's something that's a bit of a slight worry on our parts, because right now we're having to deal with a lot of rodenticide issues with raptors. And Walter, I believe you kind of wanted to bring up this topic, and this is a perfect time to do it, I think.
Well, I think it's important that people understand the implications of using that sort of poison. And I think historically, a lot of times humans have tried to intervene in the environment only to have it have sort of disastrous rippling effects. And I think trying to control the rat population with poison means that the things that eat those things get poisoned, and then the things that eat those things get poisoned, and those toxics build up along the chain. And that's definitely been something that has been an issue within urban areas in particular. I know they've found some great horned owls in Golden Gate Park that have been incapacitated by eating rodents that have ingested rodenticide. And then larger animals too, like coyotes, and it can work its way all the way up to the mountain lion that was found on the outskirts of LA, who also suffered from mange and other ailments that were brought on by rodenticide poisoning. So I think it's critical for people to understand that if you have a pest problem, that's not really a safe way to do it if you care about the environment. And there are other solutions, and I think there are people that are working on that. Raptors are the solution. That website, Raptors are the solution. Rats is a great resource for information about this.
Yeah, and we don't expect it to be a major problem with peregrines because they don't eat a lot of rodents. But and we also didn't see any evidence that particular rodent had been killed by pesticides. But it's something that I think people should be aware of. We still haven't kind of figured out all of the environmental toxicity issues that's harming wildlife, and we're still working on that as a world.
It is worth noting, though, since peregrine falcons are not usually rodent eaters, they're only eating rodents if there's a very easy opportunity that they see. And rodenticides make the rodents off balance. It causes neurological problems. So the easy opportunity is very likely a poisoned rodent.
Yeah, well, it's nice to see the counterpoint of them mating when we're talking about
Yeah.
Yeah, I think our playlist here is sort of beginning of the season to the end of the season. So, you know, this is the start of those baby peregrines' life right there.
Yeah.
All right. So actually, we're getting a lot of this question. Will we be able to see Annie and Grinnell teaching the kids to hunt? What does that look like?
So for peregrine falcons, basically what the process is that Annie and Grinnell will be flying in with food in their talons, and the chicks will start pursuing them very aggressively to the point where the bird, or Annie and Grinnell, will drop the bird and the chick needs to go catch it before it hits the ground. There's some debate in the literature whether this is intentional or not. It's hard to know what the bird is thinking without being able to ask the bird. So it's hard to say what they are, intentionally doing, but that is certainly how the chicks learn to pursue prey. And in some instances, Annie and Grinnell would bring in a live bird, which they'll then drop for the chicks to start to try to hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And this process is similar in a lot of raptors, I would imagine. Walter, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's really similar to the red tails that I've watched in near Sutro Baths in San Francisco, and watching them bring prey and have the prey. Originally, they bring it to the nest, they feed them. Eventually, they bring the prey and they let the chicks sort of feed themselves. And then they move on, they bring the prey nearby once they've fledged or are near fledging, and sort of encourage them to move away from the nest to come to where the prey deliveries are happening. And then your what you said about them bringing live prey and then sort of teaching them how to subdue and kill the prey so that they can eat it. It feels like all these, you talked about intention, and this whole thing feels very intentional, and we, I think there's probably the discussion about intention versus instinct, and but it feels very intentional to me. And then you get to the point at which they have taught them well enough and they become good hunters, and then at that point they become competition, and then that switch flips and all of a sudden they get driven away so that they can disperse. It's fascinating to watch the sort of the falcon or the raptorial education system at play. I think the question was about, will we be able to watch them and see them? And I feel like that's like the photographer's, like the bane of my existence. If you're trying to document somebody or I call them, they're almost like persons to me, but you're trying to document this, this really dynamic act when they are operating in a space that is so much larger and more dimensional, and they have access to such distance and speed that if anything, you can only hope to see like a little portion or a snippet of it, and then it's the collection of time, like of all of those little aspects of it that you see that you can stitch together to tell the bigger story. So if anyone gets a chance to see it, it'd be great.
Yeah, and so that is kind of the thing. At this point, it really is, we have a couple people who are avid photographers who are on the ground that we're getting pictures from occasionally, but that's really the only way we have to bring these observations of the prey exchange and the teaching, how the adults are teaching them to you guys. They're probably not going to be catching that too much on the webcam at this point. So yeah, any aspiring photographers, these falcons are out there right now. All right, so will this be the only nesting this year?
Yes, it will. Once peregrine falcons have had a successful brood, they will not have another. They will try to re-nest many times if the nest fails when they're still at the egg phase. But once they have chicks, they generally do not try again, even if they fail.
All right. So, always important, we covered this a little bit with rodenticides, but what are the dangers for a high-speed hunter in an urban environment?
One of the biggest ones is windows, and especially around a place like Berkeley or other really kind of more urban center environments. It's tall buildings with big windows. Birds can't often see windows very well. They reflect the sky, so they think that they're flying into more sky. Or they might reflect bushes and they think that they're hopping into a bush. So that's one of the main worries that urban birds have, one of the main dangers that urban birds have. Other objects that they can collide with are power lines and cars are also dangers. And any other thoughts, Walter?
I was just thinking about I think the dangers inherent in being a young raptor in general, since they have such a high mortality rate, 70+%. I'm not sure if that's the same figure with peregrines specifically, but it's a hard life, and maybe the assumption is that if a young peregrine fledges, they all have sort of an equal chance at making it. But I think what I've noticed is that some of them have they have to kind of catch on to what it means to hunt, to what it means to make those decisions about what's worth going after and what isn't worth going after, because you have to make decisions about it, know whether or not you're going to be injured if you try to take on something that's too big. Learning the hazards and actually being able to navigate them. I feel like there are certain birds that make it to adulthood and beyond that are very skilled at figuring all of that out, and there are some younger birds that never quite really get the hang of it. So I think part of the danger is just that there's a learning curve, and they have to step out into it without a lot of guidance. And if they're born in the right place, then the environment can sort of support them making mistakes. But in the city, it's hard to make a mistake and come back from it.
All right, so how long are the parents going to stay with the fledglings?
So it depends. With peregrine falcons, it actually depends on whether the bird is migratory or not. In the case here, they are not migratory, so they're going to be sticking around the Bay Area. So they might stay up to 10+ weeks with the parents. For migratory birds, it's 4 to 6 weeks is the average time that they're cared for. So we might see them for another month, or we might see them for another 2 months. It's a little hard to say.
All right, and then this question kind of, how far might they end up going when they become independent?
Oh man, that is
we wish we could study that.
Yeah, that's like the ultimate desire to answer that question, because juvenile dispersal is one of the hardest things to study in ornithology. You need some really crazy expensive equipment strapped to birds, and it's really hard to get that onto raptors at the right age, because when you band them, they aren't full size in the body, they're full size in the legs, so it's harder to attach stuff to their body. Where we would be able to follow them after they leave the nest.
Yeah.
So the only way we can know that right now is through band resighting.
But the problem is, so the bands are an amazing tool to find out where birds went and where they came from. But of course, we see the peregrines who are banded in the Bay Area, most commonly in the Bay Area again, but that's not necessarily because the peregrines are staying in the Bay Area every time. It's also that there are people in the Bay Area to see those peregrines.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So band resighting requires someone to actually see that band, and so that requires a lot of people looking. So if you ever see a band, report it. It's incredibly valuable information to the scientists who put that band out there. And the only one we know of right now is Laurentium. From 2 years ago, who now lives on Alcatraz and just had chicks of her own, and so that makes Annie and Grinnell grand falcons.
Oh, right. So, always wondered where do Grinnell and Annie do their hunting in Berkeley? Have we been witness to swooping in for a kill?
So we know they hunt down by the marina because we've seen them bring in prey from like water birds. We've seen coots and stilts and a few other species. And we know they hunt up in the hills because we've seen them with acorn woodpeckers and a few other species that are kind of unique to the hills. But I think the most of the hunting they do is wherever they find pigeons, which is kind of everywhere around downtown and on campus. I have not seen...
I've personally observed Grinnell get a pigeon downtown near where they're doing construction right now, and that crane.
Well, I'm really jealous.
Yeah.
But yeah, Walter, have you had any experience with how wide-ranging a single bird can be for hunting?
I think peregrines would probably take the cake when it comes to making distance to get prey and come back. My experience with red tails was there might be some similarities, but the Patch, the raptor that I spent time with at Alta Plaza Park, she would hunt extensively around the park and then every few days make forays out into the other parts of the city. And usually I'd lose her at some point, a half a mile out or something. And she rarely ever came back with anything. So it wasn't, she wasn't a breeding bird. She didn't need to bring anything back. So if she was hunting to survive, she might have found some hunting grounds in other places. But there was just the park itself was just an abundant place, like the city is, you mentioned with pigeons in Berkeley. And if she decided to, she could have just stayed there and probably made her way just fine. I think it's really fascinating to think about the range of the peregrines, and someday in the future we'll have a way to fly along with them and keep track of them and really learn their secrets. But up until then, I think it's pretty great to be comfortable with the mystery.
Yeah, and you actually kind of bring up an interesting point about the raptors, because I have done studies that have involved tracking adult raptors in the Sierra, and you'll often find that they have a core territory that they occupy that's actually a very small space that they use for roosting and where they would consider building a nest and that kind of thing. And it's a very small area, except they'll hunt huge amounts of space around that, even though they spend very little time in any given place outside of their own territory. Okay, so here's one that I might, okay, so when might Annie get pregnant, or eggnant is that's used. Showed a clip earlier of Grinnell and her copulating. Could she be pregnant already? So that particular clip was an old clip in our retrospective here, but it's worth noting that we have observed Annie and Grinnell mating several times in the last week from below. And they're not doing that with the intentions of starting another brood of chicks. They're doing that with the intention of maintaining their pair bond, as you might say. So there's another way that peregrine falcons are kind of relatable.
Do they also have a display flight like red tails, where they, in the fall, you can see them sort of maintaining their pair bonds by displaying in certain ways? Do peregrines do the same thing?
We've seen them do the head bow display several times in the off season. I don't know if we've seen any display flights, but it's kind of hard to keep track of where exactly they are in the off season. They occasionally show up on the Campanile, but yeah.
All right, so we have a question here from Miranda. So why do they get their feathers so quickly, but things like the yellow coloring takes an entire year?
Great question. Part of it is that having the plumage, their feather coloring, be kind of more of a brownish as their juveniles is safer for them. They're harder to see for potential predators like great horned owls and that kind of stuff. And they don't really have a need to have that yellow coloring to show off to mates. So that's kind of why we don't see them get that full adult plumage right away. It's all about being safe as a juvenile.
Yeah, well, and it should be noticed they do have to get their feathers in really quickly because you need all of those feathers to fly. So you have to be full-sized and you need all of your feathers because they only grow those feathers once a year. It takes a lot of energy to do that. And so that's why they grow in brown feathers that grow really fast. And that's also why there's not a lot of color they're developing because that's not the most important thing on the agenda. It's getting those feathers in so they can fly right away.
Can you talk a little about fault bars?
Oh yeah, so that is sort of an interesting thing you can see. And actually our juveniles, we did not observe any fault bars, and that's a sign of really good health. But so what will happen is if there's early on when the feathers are developing, if there's something wrong, if they suddenly have a lack of nutrition, if parasites are causing a problem, there'll be places where the feathers are weak as they come in, and you'll actually see these little bars of weakness where the feathers are less developed, just little. And so that's actually, so people do often are like, have the chicks been getting enough food? Is there a problem? We don't see those fault bars and other signs that they're not getting enough food. So.
So we have a question on the feather samples taken during banding to analyze mercury levels. We do not have any results yet. Zika was still collecting feathers and was waiting to analyze until she had all of the feathers collected. So I'm not sure when she's scheduled to be done with that, but we'll let you know as soon as we get some information from Zika.
Yeah, and maybe I'll ask another person who's been doing work with mercury levels in other species and how it's affecting them is a kind of friend of the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory program named Ryan Borbor, and maybe we can get him to write a post about the implications of the mercury in birds.
So this is kind of an interesting question. Will the grand falcons, Larry's kids, be banded? So peregrine falcons are very hard to catch to band them. So probably not. The kids have fledged, so we can't go to their nest, which is where most peregrine falcons are banded. So if you can't get to the nest, it can be really hard to be able to handle one and be able to put a band on them. There are other species, lots of rodent-eating species and other stuff that is easier to trap, so you can band birds a lot easier, but peregrines are a lot harder.
Yeah, but yes, so next year we're hoping Larry is going to be nesting on Alcatraz again, and next year we'll probably be able to band the kids. It's just that this year access to Alcatraz has been very limited for any of the biologists, well, for anybody. So we only just found about the chicks being there, and they were already full size and moving around.
Next question is, what is the maturity age for the chick for sexual maturity? So chicks can try to breed in their second year, but it's pretty rare. I believe the PG&E male is currently a second-year bird.
Yeah.
So the bird nesting on the PG&E tower in downtown San Francisco, you don't see that very often, and often the inexperience of that bird is a detriment to that nest succeeding. So we'll see. Hopefully PG&E birds will be fine. I think they're scheduled to hatch in the next few days. But usually they start in their third year. They'll start producing.
Yeah, because that, according to Mary Malik, who's one of the falcon gurus in the area, although that second-year bird up on the PG&E, that's the male right now, although he's, it seems like the chicks they'll be hatching, but she said that the male's inexperience shows.
Yeah, I have a story about a red shoulder in Golden Gate Park, and the female was a second-year bird who actually stopped her molt mid-molt to breed, and the eggs hatched, but the nest was really poorly built, and then I think there were some issues with the defense of the nest when some ravens came through, and one of the young red shoulders ended up on the ground. Luckily, we were able to bring it to wild care, and they put it back up in the nest in a laundry basket, in the tree in a laundry basket, in place of the nest that was shoddily put together by out of inexperience. And the parents returned to it, and the chick fledged, and everything turned out great. So it is possible for young females to. I thought it was really fascinating that she halted her molt and then went through the process and then began to get her adult feathers again afterwards.
Yeah, and actually a pause in molt is a sign of all energy is being expended somewhere else, and that's like a sign of stress. So yeah, that bird was
stressed out.
That bird was stressed out.
Yeah.
So this is in regards to the juvenile interloper that was visiting the nest a couple of times earlier in the season. We have not seen that individual again, but there was potentially an interloper the second day after the males, Sequoia and Redwood, fledged that briefly flew by the tower, and Annie chased them off. We didn't get a great look at it, but we think we saw one. So it's just a sign that there's a lot of peregrines around right now.
Oh, hang on,
I read a question about whether or not Berkeley was a better or worse urban environment for peregrines than other big cities. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I'd say that at least in the case of UC Berkeley, they probably are a bit at an advantage over other urban birds because, well, one, the Campanile is the highest point around. There isn't another place that predators would be able to come from and go unnoticed. And also there isn't a lot of traffic around. For example, birds that are in downtown San Francisco are facing a lot more vehicle traffic and a lot more large glass buildings and just a lot more issues than that. So, there we go.
I like this question a lot. Are the smaller peregrines at a disadvantage compared to the larger ones in hunting? So no, and it's actually kind of a really cool case of how kind of one of the evolutionary benefits of the size difference is that Annie and Grinnell are hunting different food, so they're not competing against each other in the same space. So it's kind of one of the cool benefits of having that huge size difference is Annie's going to be going for much larger prey, like larger pigeons, and Grinnell goes for much smaller prey, like smaller songbirds. And so they don't really have to argue with each other over who gets food.
Yeah, well, and a female peregrine can catch prey as large as a goose, and peregrines can also catch prey as small as a hummingbird. And yeah, the males and females are just better at kind of one end of the spectrum versus the other. Yeah.
Great question.
This one, just a quick one. Cams are on all year round. So if you ever want to see the sunset at Berkeley, hop on the cams. We'll take them offline for maintenance, tower maintenance and that kind of stuff. But otherwise, we just leave them on.
Yeah, and we do see the adults every so often during the winter. And by February, they're mating and they're pretty frequently again.
I lost my mouse. There we go.
Can I make a quick shout out before we go to the next question?
Yeah.
I just wanted to let everybody who's watching know, if they don't already know, about Black Birders Week that's happening. And actually right now there is a live stream going on about birding while black. So if you're here, when you're done, make sure you go over to the Audubon Society's Facebook page, and you can actually watch their stream about birding while black. It's got some pretty, luminaries of the field are present. So
yeah, some real amazing people talking today.
Yeah, I felt a little bad because I didn't until earlier this morning realize that our thing was concurrent with theirs.
Yeah, there's a lot of things happening simultaneously right now.
All right. So you may have noticed as the chicks got older, they started eating more and more on their own and with less plucked prey. So when they first started out, Annie was bringing them, these tiny morsels of fully plucked prey and just giving them the choice pieces of muscle. And then as they got older, they got full pieces of bone and feather, and then eventually they're just handed full birds to eat. So it's a learning process for them as they learn as their digestive system catches up to be able to process undigestible food. And also a learning process as they learn how to pluck and eat their own prey.
That also, it brings up that idea of intention that we talked about earlier too. Like the fact that they start with little tiny morsels, and then they get bigger, and then they have feathers, and then they go through that sequence. And it just occurred to me that might just be a result too of, I don't have to do all that work for you. You're not tiny anymore. And so the adult birds are just easing back, doing less and less and less work and conserving their energy. And as a result, is when the capabilities of the young birds grow, the parents can step back, and it may look like one is leading the other, but I have a feeling that it might be about energy conservation.
Good thought.
All right, so why don't juveniles return to their nest to sleep?
Well, we did see Poppy do that once.
Yeah,
she came back to take a nap for a bit. But usually they're just kind of, right now they're still trying to conserve energy as they're learning to fly. So they're not doing too many unneeded flights. So they kind of just at night go to sleep wherever they ended up that evening. I don't know if there's a real good reason that they don't return to the nest site aside from they're just kind of have grown out of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's some real good reasons that a lot of other species of raptors don't, and that's because other species of raptors, there's actually a built nest, for example, in a tree that's exposed, that it's advantageous for them not to be in the same place every day where a predator might be able to find them.
Walter, did the red tails you follow, did they have particular roost trees that they stayed in regularly?
They had a couple of habits, but I think one of them had they had trees that they preferred, but they would always choose different places in the trees. I noticed it wasn't always the same branch, and you never really knew which one they would be in at any given time, and sometimes you just couldn't find them at all. So I think they get really good at disappearing when they need to. It's a good skill to have.
All right, question for Walter. How and when did you get into avian and raptor photography?
I think it was 2005. I just returned from a residency in Iceland, and I had borrowed a friend's camera. And when I got back to San Francisco, I still had the camera with me, and I would walk out from work and take breaks and photograph the birds that were around me. And at that time, someone gave me a book on birds of Northern California, and it really triggered a kind of long dormant interest that was started years ago when I was 6 or 7, when my grandmother gave me a book on birds. So I just started to photograph them, try to document them, and I had some pretty remarkable early encounters that ended up being my spark experiences. And when we talk about that bird Patch, that red tail landed on the ground next to me, and we spent about a minute together, and she didn't look troubled, and I was just super thrilled. And when it flew away, I was kind of hooked. So I spent a lot of time out photographing and took thousands and thousands of photographs. And because I photographed Patch, I ended up being introduced to the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory, because some of the people on SF Bird, where I posted the images, were curious about the band, the bird being banded. And we were able to collect the band number and figure out that it was indeed banded by GGRO. And that began my relationship with them, so that my love of raptors and my photography of them ended up having a research component as well. So it started in 2005.
All right. Do falcons choose a mate and then look for a suitable place, or does one bird find a cliff and then hope for a male? So I've always heard it described as the bird is married to the territory rather than the mate.
Yeah.
That they're looking much more for a good territory than they are looking for an individual and then looking for a place together.
Yeah, and either, especially the female, but either does sort of have veto power if a new prospective mate comes into the territory that they don't like. They will chase them off that territory, but they will switch mates if a new one comes to that territory and is able to push the original resident out.
What's the auditioning look like? I mean, is it just about being faster or stronger?
So yeah, it's usually faster and stronger. So as far as the initial process is that the new bird will have to pretty much physically push the original resident out, that they have to. So usually these confrontations can be somewhat violent, but enough that the other bird is intimidated and feels it's dangerous to be there. And then the audition process regarding whether or not the remaining individual on the territory will accept the new bird, I think that's an only the bird knows sort of thing. The males are very early in the breeding season doing almost all the hunting for the female, so the female can tell if a prospective mate is not going to be of high quality if it's not able to bring enough food. All right, so any birding groups in SoCal that Kitundu can recommend? Or I guess you're more of a NorCal.
Yeah, and I'm a Midwestern.
Yeah, you are.
Midwesternite. So unfortunately, I don't have the resources at my disposal, but I think luckily we live in the information age, and birders seem to have taken to the interwebs pretty enthusiastically. So finding some groups that might be available. And I think now that it's Black Birders Week, I think this question asked on Twitter would probably garner you a bunch of responses pretty quickly, because the amazing thing is that there's a lot of folks out there that have just connected across the entire country over that platform. So I'd probably recommend asking a question on Twitter.
I know a group to maybe start with is, I don't know if there's a SoCal chapter, but the Feminist Bird Club is a really nice group for starting into birding, because it's really designed around bringing people into birding and developing that interest and passion, and not as much about it's a really welcoming environment and really inclusive, and the whole goal is to have everyone able to get involved and be part of the birding community. And there's some great birders there and great mentors in that group.
I'll second that.
All right, so this is another hopefully short answer question. Our beautiful Falcon t-shirts. Yep. I believe the last day to buy them is in 2 days. Don't quote me on that. It's like 2 or 3 days. And then I believe they get mailed out 5 business days after that. I'm not 100% sure. I'll look that up. But yeah, Custom Ink has, I think, a 5-day window after the end of the fundraiser before they send out the t-shirts. So you still have a few days to get them if you are still looking.
All right, so while looking through the fleur de lis in the balcony, the chicks are often moving their heads up and down very quickly. What is that behavior? Walter is demonstrating a little bit there.
So birds are unlike mammals and that they can't turn their eyes and their head. So the only way they can change their field of vision is by turning their head. And so one of the things that they do when they move their head like that is just trying to gauge distance to an object and kind of get a better view of it.
Yeah, it's one of the best clues that I had when I was following red tails and interested in when they might leave the tree to pursue prey. You'd see them, really range finding, moving their head, trying to figure out. And if they if they locked in on it, oftentimes they would seem to be disinterested. They would look away. But it's because they have two fovea, 2 areas of sharp focus in their eyes, and so they get sort of a lock on it by looking this way. And then when they turn their head sideways, they get this very, very clear picture. And so there are moments when the red tails would seem to have lost interest, but really they were like, it was another way of honing in on their prey item, and then they would leap off and go and catch the gopher or whatever it was. So raptor vision is really fascinating.
Yeah, it's really, truly amazing.
So here's a tricky question, and so do Annie and Grinnell, and so this, raptors in general, do they communicate with each other? What does that look like?
Yes, they do communicate a lot. So most bird, well, I don't know if I can say most. A lot of bird vocalization is vocal, but a lot is also visual. They have very keen eyesight and very keen ears. So they do most of their communication that way. They have several different vocalizations that they do that mean different things to them. And so you'll see them kind of using different calls to mean different things. They have very distinct vocalizations when there's an intruder in their territory that they need to go chase. And then there's a lot of kind of basic like contact calls where they basically are just saying like, hey, you still there?
All right. Sorry. All right. Are we archiving footage? And the answer is, so the answer to that is we are uploading kind of clips and highlights to YouTube, and so that's on our YouTube channel and hosted there, but the entire collection of footage is not permanently archived right now.
Yeah, we have an archive of all at the very least, all the nest footage. We don't have it online. We have it on hard drives because there's a massive amount of footage. But we'll see if we can try to get that online so we could have the nest stream archived online in perpetuity.
Okay, let's see.
Oh wait, that's a good question.
All right, well, okay, in the same vein.
Yeah. Do we do any research on the video feeds? We are actually kind of hoping to do something. We're kind of talking with people about different potential research questions we can get at. There's an abundance of nest cam footage out there that people are using for research questions, and you can get lots of really cool, kind of research questions answered about like where stuff is hunting and how often food is brought to chicks and what parental care division looks like and all that kind of stuff. So there's some really cool research questions we're hoping to answer, and yeah, it's just a matter of kind of finding someone who wants to go through and annotate everything.
All right, let's see. So are both parents teaching the chicks to hunt, and how long do they continue that training? And so I'm not sure if I know the answer to this because the hunting process is so off camera for me. So I don't know, Walter, do you have insight on which parent is doing the training?
I don't. What I've seen, what I've witnessed has been both of the parents doing the training once the red-tailed chicks have fledged. But yeah, I don't have an answer. It's nice. It's nice not to have them.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think both parents will do at least some of the training, at least partially because what happens is like both parents are out hunting, and so they'll both come back with prey, and it's really the chicks that are driving it. So because they'll fly out to meet the parent and then pursue them. So they don't really care which parent is bringing food. They just go after whoever has food in their talons.
With the Cooper's hawk's nest that I've watched, at a certain point, the mama bird takes over, because if a male Cooper's hawk has had 3 daughters, they're all considerably bigger, and then it becomes kind of risky to show up with food because then you have these 3 large hawks kind of chasing you, and you know, admirably they do that. They do. But I've seen them sort of abandon the food long before the kids get there, just to kind of stay out of harm's way, because you've got these really like highly weaponized youngsters showing up, and they're not fully coordinated yet. So for a dad, it can be a little bit of a risky mission. So I think my guess would be at a certain stage it might shift to the female, if depending on the sex of the kids. Who knows?
Yeah, so you admirably actually answered this next question here. Are females more aggressive than males? Grinnell looked shy in front of Annie and the chicks, and so it's females are bigger than males, and so
A lot bigger.
yeah, the males can get shy in front of their female chicks.
So this is a question that we kind of got a lot, although more often it was, where's Grinnell? Did he die? And Grinnell often would sit like above the nest in a place where we could never get the cam on him. So Annie would often be sitting. Oh, by the way, we're seeing the interloper right now, if you remember from our earlier question. So Annie would often be sitting on the balcony, staring up at the sky, just yelling constantly, and people were like, is she waiting for Grinnell to show up? And Grinnell was just sitting right there, and they're just that was kind of more of a general communication between the two.
All right. So I like this question a lot. How would you describe the personalities of individual chicks? And I like this question because a lot of times people consider wild animals to be, you know, a peregrine falcon's a peregrine falcon, a red tail's a red tail, you know, they're all the same, and that's really not the case. You know, there's all sorts of variation within individuals, and that includes how they behave, so personalities. And so let's see, I feel like I've noticed that, so Sequoia, we believe, is the egg that was hatched last, just because Sequoia was a little bit, remained fluffier longer than the other male redwood. And so Sequoia was the slightly younger one, but Sequoia was also the one who was real active earlier, flapping a lot earlier. So it feels like Sequoia is the active one of the bunch. Poppy definitely, as a female, takes longer to like reach that full level of maturity by a few days, but Poppy also is the only one that, you know, returned to the nest box to take a nap after she learned to fly.
Yeah, and Poppy I was amazed that between the time when she hopped out onto the ledge below the nest and when she flew was an hour. And so just ready to go. Like, you know, as soon as she got to the size where she was capable of leaving the nest, she was gone. So she was ready to go.
Yes, she knew what she wanted to do and did it, and then she made it back up home when she wanted to get back home.
Yeah.
And then this was the one that, once he started flying, it took him a long time to make that decision, but he seems to have done the most flying, you know, early on. And yeah, so, and I think, I was just going to say, Walter, I think that's really why I like your work so much, is because you were able to capture personalities of birds, that you followed individuals for such long periods of time that you could see that they were unique and had different kinds of behavior and habits and things like that.
Yeah, I think if you spend any time banding raptors, you know that they have different personalities. I had the good fortune of banding only merlins that didn't like to bite, so I got really lucky. But in photographing Patch and spending so much time with one redtail, I learned her behaviors pretty well. And when another redtail would show up, it was like looking at a different species. Like, and the thing is, the local jays had also learned Patch's behavior very well. And when an interloper would arrive at the park, they would just assume all redtails were alike, and so the jays would go and mob the new redtail in the same way, not knowing that that redtail came from a place where it grew up learning to hunt birds. So then the interaction, instead of Patch, who would just tolerate the jays, this new hawk would basically pursue them all over the park. And so in that moment, you can see that, yeah, they're both redtails, but they have vastly different techniques and personalities and behaviors.
And I think that question also is the best way to answer this one. Is it's so hard to say because personality is such an important driving factor in how the siblings relate to each other. Peregrines are relatively affectionate as far as birds go for the siblings. They don't.
Yeah, as far as, you know, especially a usually solitary predator, they do spend a long time in the company of their siblings after they learn to fly.
Yeah, and they have been seen through migration periods spending time with their siblings. So, you know, that's months after they leave their parents' territory. But a lot of that can come down to individual personality. You know, one of the chicks might just be like, you know what, I like being alone, and just go off on their own, and that's it. But some of the siblings might like to spend more time. It's a little hard to say right now what we're going to get because they're still not quite in control enough of their flight to be always going where they want to go. So hopefully we'll see that in a little bit, kind of them choosing to spend time together or not, if that's their personality.
Yeah, and so then, you know, the rest of the question is sort of, was Poppy missing her nest buddies when they fledged before her? Is that just anthropomorphizing? And, you know, they have their different personalities, but, you know, whether what they're experiencing is akin to the feeling we have of missing somebody, we really can't tell. So they are bonded. They behaviorally show that they want to, for the first several months, remain with siblings frequently. What that really means to them is hard to say. So describe it as like a personal missing is maybe anthropomorphizing, but there is something there.
There was an earlier question too about whether or not they are going to recognize each other if in 3 years' time they came across one of their kids.
And so by the time that they have started parting ways, they've become full adults and are starting to establish territories. they will have changed their relationship into potential competitors. And so it is the highest priority for an adult peregrine falcon to find a nest site and a mate. And so whether or not another bird is their sibling doesn't come into that equation at that point in their life.
That's cold.
All right, we got time for one more question. So let's kick this one to Walter. What bird was the most interesting to photograph, or most challenging?
That's a really good question. It's for someone that has I mean, I have a real love for the bird that I happen to be observing, and I think because of the sheer amount of time I've spent with red tails, I think I have to. They kind of take the prize. Most challenging, I think, is any bird who really doesn't like to be seen, like lives in the undergrowth or lives at night. You know, is nocturnal, and so you want to be able to find a way to get naturalistic images of them without maybe disturbing them, or certain birds they provide a real challenge in terms of finding your way into their environment in a way that makes for good photographs and is also like safe for the bird itself. So yeah, well, I can tell you one thing. Very tiny birds are easy. Hummingbirds, because they're so tiny, they always kind of stay in one place, and then it gets really difficult, and then really big birds are easy again, like great blue herons. They kind of slow back down when they get to a certain scale. So it's all those in-between little birds that are really challenging to document.
Which I feel like it's just worth mentioning. The species Sean currently studies at UC Berkeley is called the black rail, which is like the Sasquatch of birds that live in dense rushes and wetlands. So you hear them and virtually never see them, I think. The two of us once got real lucky and managed to snap a picture of one once.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I've spent probably cumulatively many days of my life trying to get pictures of those guys and have never gotten a good one.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe Walter, that can be a mission for you sometime when you come visit, get the Sasquatch picture.
For sure. If I could offer any words of encouragement as we end tonight, it would be that nature's pretty much consistently like brilliant and interesting, and as much as you think you know about it, the thing to do is to just get out into it, because your assumptions are going to be challenged. You're going to see something miraculous. You might think you might never see a particular bird, and on that day it might land by your feet. So always just step out, because nature always does provide some sort of, even if it's a day where you don't see much, like you still gain something by being out there. So it's a great pastime and a great field of study.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess thank you all for attending. This has been a lot of fun. I think we might try to do one more if there's demand for it. It sounds like people have more questions, so maybe we'll try to do one in a couple of weeks when the birds are a little older and we can talk about their continued adventures. But big thanks to Walter for joining us for this one.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Yeah, no, I know you're a busy guy, but it's such a pleasure to see you.
It's really good to see you all too. I miss my friends. I'm looking forward to being back in the Bay Area soon.
Yeah. We'll be really excited to have you come back.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
we'll see you all
everybody.
later. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.